The wind outside screamed like a living thing. Snow slammed against the small tent, making the thin fabric shake and groan. Inside, Jack sat on the floor, wrapped in his thick coat. A cup of steaming liquid in his hands, the heater hummed softly. Beside him, giving a small circle of warmth in the middle of a white frozen world, he had been alone for days, crossing the ice fields of this strange alien planet. The storm had started hours ago, and now it was so thick that the sky and ground had blended into one endless sheet of white. Jack was used to the cold. He had spent many nights like this, trapped in storms, waiting for them to pass. But tonight felt different. There was a strange pressure in the air, a sense that something was out there in the dark. Moving closer, he tried to ignore it, sipping his drink and listening to the wind howl. Then a sound came, soft but clear, a scratching like claws dragging over the tent's outer layer. Jack froze. He slowly set his cup down and reached for the small knife lying beside him. The scratching came again, this time followed by a faint, shaky voice. Please. Jack's heartbeat quickened. It wasn't the voice of a grown man or a threatening soldier. It sounded small, weak, and afraid. He crawled to the entrance, unzipped the flap just a little, and peered out into the storm. At first, he saw only snow whipping past. Then a shadow took shape, stumbling forward. A small figure stood there, barely taller than his shoulder. She was trembling so badly it looked like she might fall apart at any moment. Her skin was pale, almost silver under the stormlight, and covered with a thin layer of frost. Her clothes were torn, far too thin for the deadly cold. Her lips were blue, and her wide, glowing eyes locked on him like he was her last hope. Jack opened the flap wider before he could speak. She swayed on her feet and whispered, "Please, warm me." Her voice cracked on the last word. Then her knees buckled, and she collapsed forward into his arms. She was ice cold to the touch, her body shaking uncontrollably. Jack didn't have time to think. He pulled her inside, zipped the tent closed, and dragged her toward the heater. The warmth hit her slowly. Jack grabbed a thick thermal blanket and wrapped it tightly around her small frame. Her shivering didn't stop. She curled up near the heater, eyes half closed, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts. Jack knelt beside her, speaking gently. "You're safe now. Just breathe. It's okay." She blinked at him, her strange eyes reflecting the heater's orange light. There was something about those eyes. They were too bright, too alive for someone so close to freezing to death. "What's your name?" Jack asked softly. For a moment, she didn't answer, just stared at him. Then her lips moved. "Lyra," she whispered, as if speaking cost her effort. Jack nodded. "I'm Jack," he said. She gave a tiny nod in return, but didn't say more. Instead, she pulled the blanket tighter, her eyes darting toward the tent's entrance like she expected something or someone to come through it. Jack noticed her breathing quicken every time the wind howled. She wasn't just scared of the cold. Something else was haunting her. He decided not to push her yet. Instead, he poured some of his hot drink into a small cup and held it out too. Her hands were so cold they could barely grip it, but she took a sip, and a faint color returned to her cheeks. For a moment, Jack thought she might smile, but then she looked away, her shoulders tense. Outside, the storm roared on. The tent shook, and snow piled up around it. Inside, the small heater kept them alive, its glow pushing back the shadows. Jack sat across from her, watching her closely. He had rescued travelers before miners caught. In Blizzard's Lost Scouts, but Lyra was different. He could feel it. Something in the way she looked at him, like she had been searching for him. Not just shelter. Her eyes kept moving, not just to the tent flap, but to the metal supply box in the corner. It was sealed tight, holding his tools, spare food, and equipment. At first, he thought she was just curious. But there was a sharpness in her gaze. She knew what she was looking at. Jack didn't mention it, but he filed it away in his mind. There was more to this girl than a simple case of hypothermia. The heater hummed, the wind howled, and the two of them sat in the small circle of light. Lyra sipped her drink slowly, her eyes never fully relaxing. Jack felt the weight of unspoken words between them. Whatever had brought her to his tent tonight wasn't over. And as the storm outside grew stronger, he had a feeling that by letting her in, he had just stepped into something far bigger than a winter rescue. The storm outside had not stopped. Snow kept hammering the tent, the sound like thousands of tiny fists beating on the thin fabric. Jack sat cross-legged near the heater, watching Lyra closely. She sat wrapped in the thermal blanket, her knees pulled to her chest, her head bowed low. But even with the warmth filling the tent, she was still trembling. Not like before. This shaking was different. It wasn't the cold anymore. It was fear. Jack tried again, speaking in a calm voice. "You're safe here, Lyra. Nobody's going to hurt you." Her head lifted slightly, and her strange, glowing eyes met his for a second. It felt like she was trying to read his soul. Then she looked away again, her gaze darting toward the sealed metal supply box in the corner. Jack noticed, but stayed silent. If she was after something, she wasn't ready to tell him yet. The heater's orange glow made the inside of the tent feel smaller. Jack poured her another cup of hot drink. She accepted it with both hands, her fingers still stiff from the cold as she sipped. Jack finally asked, "Where were you before you found my tent?" Her lips pressed together. After a long pause, she said, "Running." Her voice was quiet, but heavy with meaning. Jack waited, hoping she would say more. Instead, she shook her head. Like the memory was too painful to speak. Outside, the wind let out a long, low howl. Lyra flinched so hard she nearly spilled her drink. Jack's eyes narrowed. "That sound. Is that what you're running from?" he asked. Lyra didn't answer directly, but her trembling grew worse. She whispered, "They can smell the heat." "They'll come." Jack frowned. "They? Who's they?" But Lyra only shook her head again, clutching the blanket tighter. He leaned back, thinking. If she was in danger from some predator, he could understand, but her eyes told a different story. This wasn't fear of animals. This was fear of something intelligent, something that hunted her for a reason. The storm outside made it impossible to leave now, so whatever the danger was, it would have to wait until morning. At least, that's what Jack thought. Minutes passed in silence. The heater hummed, the wind screamed. Lyra's eyes kept moving. Tent flap, supply box, tent flap, supply box. Finally, Jack said, "If you're looking for something, you can tell me." Her eyes widened for a moment. She looked ready to speak, but then she shook her head quickly. "No, you wouldn't believe me." Jack gave a small half smile. "I've seen a lot out here. Try me." But she only turned away, her face hidden by the blanket. Hours later, the tent had grown warmer. Jack was starting to relax, thinking maybe she would fall asleep. But just as his eyes began to close, he heard movement, soft steps on the tent floor. He opened his eyes slightly, pretending to be asleep. Lyra was kneeling by the supply box, her hands moving over the lock. She wasn't rummaging blindly, she was searching with purpose. Jack stayed still, watching her fingers. Trembled as if she feared she didn't have much time. Finally, he spoke, looking for something. Lyra froze. Slowly, she turned her head toward him, her eyes wide with guilt. Her lips trembled, and then she said in a shaking voice, "It's in here. The only thing that can save my people." Jack sat up. "Your people? What are you talking about?" She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "They'll die without it. All of them, but I can't tell you more. They'll hear." Before Jack could ask who they were, a sound cut through the storm. Not the howl of the wind. This was sharper, heavier. The crunch of footsteps in deep snow, Jack's instincts. Sharpened instantly, Lyra's face went pale. "They found me," she whispered. Her voice breaking, her hands gripped the blankets so tightly her knuckles turned white. Jack reached for his knife, his eyes locked on the tent flap. The footsteps stopped right outside. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a deep, rumbling voice called out in a language Jack didn't understand. It was harsh, full of authority. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Jack glanced at her, and she mouthed one word, "Hunters." A shadow moved across the thin tent wall. Whoever was outside was huge, their outline blurred by the snow, but unmistakably tall and broad. Another voice joined the first, then another, 3 of them, surrounding the tent. Jack's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a lost girl seeking warmth. He had taken in someone who was being hunted, and now the hunters had come to his door. The tent's zipper moved slightly. Jack's hand tightened on his knife. Lyra's breathing was fast and shallow. She leaned toward him, whispering so softly he almost didn't hear. "If they get me, you'll never see the sun again." Her words sent a chill through him that no storm could match. Outside, one of the hunters called again. Louder this time, the storm had trapped them together. But now Jack wondered if the real danger wasn't outside, was sitting right in front of him, wrapped in his blanket. The voices outside faded for a moment, replaced by the sound of the wind. Jack stayed perfectly still, his knife in his hand, his body tense. Lyra sat frozen, her wide glowing eyes locked on the tent flap. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. Deeply, as if any sound might draw the hunters in, Jack leaned toward her, whispering, "Stay quiet. Whatever happens, don't move." She gave the smallest nod, clutching the blanket around her like it was a shield. The hunters outside spoke again, their strange language cutting through the storm. One voice was deeper, slower, commanding the others. Jack could tell this was the leader. The other 2 shifted in the snow, their boots crunching closer to the tent. Jack knew the thin fabric offered no real protection. If they decided to come in, nothing could stop them. Still, he kept his grip tight on the knife, his eyes flicking between the flap and Lyra. Minutes passed. The voices moved further away. And then the sound of the storm took over again. Jack waited, counting his breaths, until he was sure they were gone. Only then did he lower the knife. Lyra's shoulders slumped, but the tension in her eyes didn't fade. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They never stop." Jack frowned. "Why are they after you? And what's in that box you keep looking at?" Lyra hesitated, her hands twisting the blanket. For a long moment, Jack thought she might stay silent. Then she took a shaky breath. "There's something in your supply box," she said. "Something. Small metal and glowing knits not from your world." Jack blinked. "You mean this strange orb I found in the ice cave?" Her head snapped up. "You have it?" she asked urgently, leaning forward. Jack nodded slowly. "I thought it was just a piece of alien tech." "Didn't know it was important." Lyra's voice grew tight. "It's not just important. It's life itself." She glanced toward the tent flap, lowering her voice even more. "My people call it the heart seed. Without it, our sun will die. And with it, our world." Jack stared at her. "That sounds like something worth protecting. So why are they calling you a traitor?" Lyra's eyes darkened. "Because I took it," she said, her voice trembling. "I stole it from my own leaders. They wanted to use it as a weapon instead of saving the sun." Jack leaned back, letting her words sink in. "So they sent hunters after you," he said slowly. Lyra nodded. "They're sworn to bring it back, no matter the cost. And to kill me for what I did." Jack studied her face. There was no sign she was lying. But he could see the guilt in her eyes. Still, something about the way she looked at him told him this wasn't the whole truth. there was something else. Something she hadn't told him yet before Jack could ask. The storm outside shifted. The wind dropped suddenly, leaving a strange silence. Lyra froze, tilting her head as if she could hear something far away. They've stopped moving. She whispered, "That means they're waiting." Waiting for the dark to end. Jack frowned. Why wait? Lyra's gaze was fixed on him now, her voice almost fearful. "Because they can't enter the temple without you?" Jack's grip on the knife tightened. "What do you mean, without me?" Lyra's breathing quickened, her hands twisting in. "The blanket, the heart seed, is locked. It was hidden by your kind long before I was born." The lock's only open for a human. Jack stared at her in disbelief. "So you didn't just stumble into my tent because you were freezing, you? Were looking for me?" Lyra didn't deny it. Her glowing eyes met his steadily. "Yes. I needed you," she said softly, "and I still do." Jack felt a weight in his chest. It wasn't just about surviving the storm anymore. He was part of something much bigger. If what she said was true, the hunters wouldn't leave until they had him too, because without him, they couldn't open whatever the heartseed was locked inside. He glanced toward the supply box. The thought of opening it now made his skin prickle. The tent suddenly shook as if something heavy had slammed. Against it, Lyra flinched, scrambling back. Jack sprang to his feet, knife in hand. The sound came again, a heavy thump, followed by deep, slow breathing. They hadn't left after all. One of the hunters was testing the tent. Jack could almost feel its eyes through the fabric, searching for weakness. Lyra's voice was barely a breath. "They won't kill you yet. They need you alive. But they will take you." Jack's jaw tightened. "Not if I take you both out of here first." She looked at him, startled. "You'd help me? Even after what I've done?" Jack didn't answer right away. The wind began to rise again. And the thumping stopped, replaced by the hunter's footsteps fading into the distance. Finally, he said, "I don't care what you've done. I just care what's chasing you." Lyra's eyes softened. But there was still fear behind them. "They'll come back," she said. "They always do." Jack knew she was right. The storm wouldn't protect them forever. Soon, they'd have to leave the tent behind. Find the temple and face whatever waited there. And for the first time since she arrived, Jack realized that the real danger wasn't the hunters outside, was the truth Lyra still wasn't telling him. Asterisk, the storm had slowed, but the air outside was still heavy with frost. The wind now came in slow, cold waves, carrying the sound of distant crunching footsteps. Jack stood near the tent flap, gripping his knife so tightly that his knuckles were white. Lyra sat close to the heater, but her glowing eyes never left the entrance. She knew before he did, this was the moment they had been waiting for. The hunters were here, and this time, they were not just circling. The first shadow appeared against the thin tent wall. A tall figure, broad shoulders, head almost brushing the top of the fabric. Its outline was blurred by frost and snow, but its size alone sent a cold chill through Jack's chest. Then another shadow joined it, and then a third. They moved slowly, deliberately, like predators who already knew their prey had nowhere to run. A deep, rumbling voice spoke in their strange language. Jack couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. This was no request. Lyra flinched, pressing the blanket tighter against her chest. Her breathing grew fast and shallow. "There. Telling you to hand me over," she whispered. "They're saying I'm a traitor." Jack kept his eyes on the moving shadows. "Well, they're going to be disappointed," he muttered. One of the hunters stepped closer, the shape of its long weapon pressing against the tent fabric. The voice came again, this time sharper. Lyra's hands shook as she gripped Jack's sleeve. "They're warning you. They say if you keep me, your world will burn." Jack glanced at her. "That's supposed to scare me?" Her eyes flickered with something he couldn't read, fear. Yes, but also guilt. They mean it, she whispered. They don't lie about that. A sudden movement outside made Jack step back. The zipper of the tent shifted slightly. Jack slammed his hand against it, holding it shut. Not polite to enter uninvited, he called out, though his voice was tight. The hunters didn't answer. Instead, they moved to circle the tent, their heavy boots crunching in the snow. Jack tracked their movements by sound, his heart pounding. They were testing him, looking for a weakness. The leader's shadow stopped directly in front of the entrance again. Jack could feel its presence, the air itself seeming heavier. Then, in a deep, accented voice, this time in broken English, it spoke, "Give." The girl, Jack's grip on his knife tightened. "Not happening," he said flatly. There was a pause, and then the voice came again. Colder now. "She will destroy you," before Jack could respond. Lyra's voice broke through, trembling. "They'll kill us both if we stay," she said. "We have to move now." Jack looked at the thin tent walls, the heater, the supply box. Everything here was keeping them alive, but staying meant death. He made the decision in an instant. "Pack what you can carry," he told her. "We're leaving through the back." Lyra scrambled to grab the blanket, her bare feet slipping on the tent floor. Jack opened the supply box, pulling out his pack and the metal orb she had been after. The glow from it lit his hands, and Lyra's eyes locked on it. She looked as if she wanted to reach for it, but there was no time. The sound of a blade slicing against the tent wall made them both freeze. The hunters weren't waiting anymore. They were coming in. "Go!" Jack hissed, shoving her toward the rear flap. He unzipped it just enough for her to slip through. Cold air slammed into them, and the storm's remains bit at their skin. They moved fast, crouching low as they disappeared into the snow. Behind them, the tent shuddered as the hunters tore. Through the front, shouts rang out, followed by the heavy thud of boots hitting the ground. The snow was deep, slowing their movements. Jack grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her forward. Her legs stumbled, still weak from the cold, but she didn't stop. The sound of pursuit grew louder, 3 sets of boots pounding through the snow. "They're close," Lyra gasped. Jack scanned the white emptiness ahead. A dark shape rose from the snowy, jagged ice ridge with a narrow gap in the middle. "This way," he said, pulling her toward it. They squeezed into the gap, the ice pressing cold against their shoulders. The hunters' footsteps slowed, their voices echoing somewhere behind them. Jack pushed deeper into the narrow pass until it opened into a hollow hidden from the outside. The wind was quieter here, but the cold was sharper. Lyra leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "They won't give up," she said, her voice shaking. "I know," Jack replied. "That's why we keep moving." She looked at the orb in his pack, then at him. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "You could hand me over and walk away." Jack met her gaze, his voice firm. "Not my style." Something in her expression softened, but her fear didn't vanish. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If we can reach the temple before they catch us, we have a chance. But once we're inside, everything will change." Jack didn't like the way she said it, but there was no time to ask. A distant sound reached them, one of the hunters, letting out a low, bone-deep roar. It wasn't just a call, it was a promise. They had found the trail again. Jack adjusted his pack, pulled Lyra close, and started toward the deeper ice tunnels. The hunters had arrived, and there would be no turning back now. The wind cut at their faces like shards of glass. Snow swirled around them, making the world blur into white and shadow. Jack kept his head low, one hand gripping Lyra's arm to keep her moving. His pack felt heavier now, not because of the supplies, but because of the glowing orb inside. Every step was harder than the last, the snow pulling at their legs like it wanted to drag them down behind them. The sound of the hunters carried through the storm low, steady, unhurried. They were tracking, not chasing, confident their prey could not escape. Lyra's breathing was ragged, each exhale forming a cloud in the freezing air. Her bare feet stumbled over the uneven ground, and more than once she nearly fell. Jack caught her each time, pulling her upright. "You have to keep going," he told her, his voice low but urgent. She nodded, though her glowing eyes were dimming. With exhaustion, the storm clawed at them, but Jack kept scanning the horizon, searching for anything any shape that could give them cover. A dark line appeared in the distance, half buried under snow. It took Jack a few moments to realize it was the edge of an ice canyon. If they could get down into it, they might lose. The hunter's line of sight, he pointed toward it. "This way," he said. Steering her toward the jagged drop, Lyra hesitated, her gaze flicking back toward the faint shadows moving in the storm behind them. "They'll follow us," she said, her voice barely audible. Jack tightened his grip on her arm. "Then we make sure they can't." The canyon edge was steep, the walls slick with frost. Jack scanned for a way down and spotted a slope partially hidden by fallen snow. It wasn't safe, but neither was. Standing here, he tested the ground with his boots held, though it was slippery. "Hold on to me," he told Lyra. She clung to him. Her small frame pressed against his side as they began the careful descent. The ice groaned under their weight, each step sending tiny cracks through the frozen wall. Halfway down, Jack heard the crunch of snow above them. The hunters had reached the canyon edge. A deep voice shouted something in their alien tongue, and then a sharp blast rang out. The ice near Jack's foot exploded, sending shards flying. "They're shooting at us," he shouted, pulling Lyra lower. Another blast hit, spraying them with fragments of ice. They slid the rest of the way, landing hard on the canyon floor. Lyra winced, clutching her side, but they couldn't stop now. The canyon was narrow, the walls towering above them like jagged teeth. The wind was weaker here, but the air was still biting cold. Jack turned them toward the darker end of the gorge, hoping it would lead to a natural tunnel. His boots crunched in the snow, each step echoing off the ice walls. Lyra's breathing was fast again, but she didn't complain. Jack could feel her determination growing despite her exhaustion. She wasn't just running for herself, she was running for something bigger. A faint glow appeared ahead, shimmering through the fog of frost. At first, Jack thought it was sunlight breaking through, but the color was wrong. It was a deep blue, pulsing softly. Lyra's eyes widened. "We're close," she whispered. "Close to what?" Jack asked. She hesitated, then said, "The old paths. They lead to the temple." Jack didn't know if he should feel relief or worry. If the temple was close, it meant safety, lest the hunters reached it first. They rounded a bend in the canyon and found the source of the glow. A narrow crevice split the ice wall, light spilling out from within. Jack stepped inside, finding a sloping passage lined with crystals that glowed like frozen stars. The air here was warmer, and for the first time since they fled the tent, Jack felt his muscles relax slightly. Lyra touched the wall with her fingers, and the crystals flickered brighter. "This is an old road, built long before the hunters came," she said softly, almost with reverence. But their moment of calm didn't last. The sound of boots echoed behind them, faster now. The hunters had found the canyon floor and were moving quickly. Jack grabbed Lyra's hand and broke into a run, the crystals flashing past them as they plunged deeper into the glowing tunnel. Their footsteps echoed, the walls closing in tighter until Jack's shoulders brushed the ice. Lyra kept glancing back, her fear clear. "They're faster here," she said, her voice tight. The narrow paths helped them. The tunnel opened suddenly into a massive chamber. The ceiling soared above them, lit by hundreds of glowing ice crystals. In the center, a frozen archway rose from the ground, its surface carved with strange patterns. Jack stopped in his tracks, staring at it. "What is this?" he asked. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the carvings. "It's the gate. The entrance to the temple," she said, her voice trembling. "Once we pass through, they can't follow us, not without you." Before Jack could ask what she meant, the chamber shook with a deep roar. The hunters were close to close. The echo of their boots was already spilling into the chamber. Jack didn't hesitate. "Then we move now," he said, pulling her toward the arch, but as they stepped into its shadow, Lyra's hand tightened around his. "Once we go through," she whispered, "nothing will be the same again." Jack met her gaze, then looked toward the tunnel where the hunter's shadows were appearing. He didn't know what waited beyond that gate, but he knew they had no other choice. Together, they stepped toward the glowing arch, the storm and the hunters fading behind them, and as the blue light swallowed them whole, Jack felt the strange weight of the orb in his pack grow warmer. It was like it knew they were getting closer to where it belonged. The blue light of the arch swallowed them completely. For a moment, Jack felt weightless, as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. Then his boots touched solid ice again, but the air was different, warmer, almost alive. They stood inside a vast frozen hall, the walls glowing with shifting patterns of light. It was like standing inside a giant crystal, each surface reflecting a soft, endless shimmer. Lyra's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "We're here," she whispered. "The Temple of the Heart Seed." Jack looked around, still gripping his pack tightly. Every step echoed faintly, the sound swallowed quickly by the ice. Strange carvings lined the walls, spirals, stars in shapes that looked almost human. In the distance, a single beam of golden light shone down on something at the far end of the hall. The object was encased in a block of ice so clear it looked like glass. Inside, Jack could see the faint glow of something familiar. "The orb," he murmured, realizing it was identical to the one in his pack. Lyra walked toward the glowing ice with slow, careful steps. Her hands trembled, and Jack could see a strange mix of awe and sorrow on her face. "This is the true heart," she said softly. "What you carry is its twine, a key to awaken it." Jack followed, scanning the walls for movement. The temple was quiet, but his instincts told him they were not alone. Lyra reached the ice block and placed her hand against it. The light inside pulsed faintly, as if answering her touch. Jack pulled the orb from his pack, its glow stronger now than ever before. The moment it was out in the open, the entire hall seemed to respond. Light patterns on the walls began to move. The air grew warmer, and the floor beneath them thrummed with a low hum. Lyra's eyes locked on the orb. "Place it here," she said, pointing to a small hollow in the ice block. Jack hesitated. "And then what happens?" Her voice was quiet, but certain. "The heart will awaken, and my world will live again." Before Jack could move, a sound tore through the hall, the sharp crack of ice breaking. He spun around, his heart sinking. The far wall shimmered, and three massive shapes stepped out from the shadows. The hunters had found a way in. Their heavy boots struck the ice with dull thuds, their red eyes fixed on Lyra. The leader raised a weapon, his voice deep and commanding. "Human, give us the girl and the key." Jack stepped in front of Lyra without thinking. Knife in hand. "Not happening," he said, his voice steady. The leader tilted his head slightly. "You protect a thief," he said, in broken English. "She has lead to you." Jack glanced back at Lyra, but her eyes stayed locked on the heart. "She took the seed to save her people," Jack said. The leader's voice dropped lower. "She took it to rule them." The words hung in the air like a heavy stone. Jack's grip tightened on the knife. "Is that true?" he asked Lyra quietly. Her jaw clenched. "I told you they wanted to use it as a weapon. I couldn't let that happen." "That's not an answer," Jack said, his voice hard. The hunters began to spread out, surrounding them. Lyra turned to Jack. Her voice urgent. If you give it to them, my people die. If you give it to me, I can stop them forever. The hum beneath the ice grew louder, vibrating up through Jack's boots. The glow from the orb in his hand was almost blinding now. He could feel heat radiating from it. Pulsing like a heartbeat, the hunters moved. Closer, their weapons ready. The leader's voice came again, human. Choose. Jack's mind raced. He didn't trust the hunters, but he wasn't sure if he could trust Lyra either. Still, one thing was certain. If the hunters got the heart, they would never stop coming. He took a deep breath and stepped toward the ice block. Lyra's eyes widened, hope flashing across her face. The hunters lunged forward, shouting in their language. Jack shoved the orb into the hollow in the ice. The reaction was instant. Light exploded through the hall, the walls flaring with blinding patterns. The ice block cracked loudly, splitting into shards that fell away. The heart seed floated free, glowing with golden light. The hunters staggered back, shielding their eyes. Lyra reached out and caught the heart in her hands. The moment she touched it, the glow from her skin brightened until it filled the room. Jack shielded his eyes from the light. When it faded, Lyra was standing tall, the heart seed glowing in her grasp. The hunters were on their knees, their weapons dropped. Lyra turned to Jack, her voice calm but powerful. It's done. The heart lives again. But as she looked at him, there was something in her gaze, something that made Jack realize this wasn't over. Not for her, and not for him. Somewhere deep within the temple, a new sound began, a slow, steady beat, like the pulse of a sleeping giant waking up. Lyra's fingers tightened around the heart seed. This place will protect us for now, she said. But when we leave, the real fight will begin. Jack looked at the kneeling hunters, then back at Lyra. He still didn't know if she had told him the whole truth. But as the golden light warmed the hall, he knew one thing for certain. He had just chosen a side. The golden glow of the heartseed filled the frozen hall. The hunters still knelt on the icy floor, their heads bowed, their red eyes dim. Jack stood near the shattered ice block, his knife still in his hand, though he no longer pointed it at anyone. His breath came slow now, but his mind was racing. Lyra stood in the center of the light, the heartseed cradled against her chest, her skin glowing so brightly it was almost hard to look at her. For a long moment, no one moved. The hum of the awakened heart echoed softly through the temple, like a slow heartbeat under the ice. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice low. So, what happens now? Lyra turned to face him, her glowing eyes meeting his. Now, my people have a chance to live, she said. The heart will heal our son, and the hunters will return home. Jack glanced at the kneeling warriors. They don't look like they're going anywhere, he muttered. Lyra's gaze hardened. They are bound by the heart. They cannot act against the one who holds it. Jack raised a brow. So, you're their master now. Her lips pressed together at his tone. I am their queen, she corrected softly. By law and by right, the words settled heavy between them. Jack remembered the hunters calling her a traitor, and the leader saying she wanted the heart for herself. You didn't tell me you were royalty, he said. Lyra's expression softened a little. I didn't tell you many things, because I needed you to help me without fear. Jack let out a dry laugh. Fear's not the word I'd use for what I've been feeling, he said. But I sure would have liked to know before half your army tried to kill me. Lyra stepped closer, the golden light following her like a living thing. I couldn't risk losing you, she said, her voice quieter now. Jack shook his head. You mean you couldn't risk losing what I could do for you? Her eyes flickered, but she didn't deny it. You're right, she admitted. At first, you were just the one who could open the lock. But then you became more than that. Jack opened his mouth to reply. but a low rumble from the walls cut him off. The light from the heart pulsed brighter, and cracks began to appear in the floor. Lyra looked around sharply. "The temple is closing itself," she said. "It knows the heart has been clamped. We'll seal away again." Jack stepped toward her. "Then let's get out before we get buried." They turned toward the great arch they had entered through. The hunters rose silently, forming a wide path for them. As Jack passed, the leader lifted his head, his deep voice carrying in broken English, "Human, you have chosen her. You must live with this." Jack paused but didn't answer. Lyra didn't look back. Her focus on the glowing exit ahead. The air grew colder as they neared the arch when they stepped through. The golden light dimmed, replaced by the gray-blue glow of the ice canyon beyond. The storm outside had weakened to a gentle snowfall. For the first time in days, the wind wasn't screaming. Jack took a deep breath of the cold air, feeling the tension in his chest loosen just a little. They walked until the temple's entrance faded behind the ice walls. Only then did Jack stop. Turning to face Lyra, "So, you've got your heart, your hunters, and your crown," he said. "Where does that leave me?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, her eyes soft but unreadable. "That depends," she said. "Do you want to leave? Or stay by my side?" Jack studied her for a long moment. He thought about the storm, the hunters, the way she had first stumbled into his tent, shivering like she was about to die. And he thought about everything since the lies, the danger, the truths she gave only in pieces. "I thought you just wanted to warm up in my tent," he said quietly. A small smile touched her lips. "Not like that," she said. "I came because I needed you. And I still do." The words caught him off guard. He searched her face, trying to decide if this was another piece of manipulation or something real. Her gaze didn't waver. "I will return home with the heart, but I will not return alone," she said. "Come with me, Jack." He glanced at the snow-covered horizon, then back at her. Life out here had been cold, lonely, and dangerous. Going with her would be even more dangerous. But for the first time in years, the idea didn't feel empty. Gus slid the knife back into its sheath. "All right," he said finally, "but I'm not bowing to you." Lyra's smile widened just a little. "I wouldn't want you to," she said. The snowfall thickened slightly, the quiet settling around them like a blanket. And as they began walking together through the ice canyon, Jack knew the storm behind them had ended. But the real one was only just beginning.